My partner signed up without me knowing on the online platform for MasterChef, and she forgot to mention that to me. What happened is a month after that night when we were watching MasterChef, my phone rings and it's from a hidden number, right? But I pick up and it's a very nice lady, very polite, calling from MasterChef, and they would like to interview me. I do the only reasonable thing that anyone would do in that case. I hang up the phone. So it took them 2 other tries to actually reach me and convince me that like, wait, this is not a spam. We are really from MasterChef. We would love to speak with you.
Welcome back to another episode of the Tourpreneur Travel Business Podcast. Every week, we talk to an interesting person in the tour and activity industry, a tour operator, a business that has something to share in terms of insights, concrete takeaways, but also an interesting story. And today's interesting story comes from the country of Hungary, which I think is the perfect name of a country for a food tour business. And my guest is Joseph Szakács, who runs Foodapest. Now, Joseph, I know I probably butchered your last name, but is it Foodapest or Foodapest for your company name?
Well, that is the $1 million question. And first of all, thank you so much for having me on the pod, mate. It's a pleasure to be here. Hungarians, they pronounce Budapest because, well, I guess you can figure out it's a play on words as in Budapest, and we can like just had our own twist on that. But from our perspective, either way works.
I love it. So it's a great name, and it's kind of a great story because you did not, like most people, enter tour operating based on a career quiz. Life kind of led you here through, I might call it a celebrity appearance on MasterChef. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much true. And it's a bit of a kind of crazy story. Budapest was a post-COVID baby, so we are only 3 years old. And before we even had an idea that we're going to create a culinary experience operator in Hungary, originally I was working in the video game industry. So I'm coming from a very nerdy background. I'm probably the nerdiest tour operator. I used to love video games, and I also worked almost 15 years in video games development. That meant I worked with companies like Microsoft, Electronic Arts, Riot Games. But what really ignited the spark for us to create like something unique came from my partner, and it all started as a practical joke, really. So rewind the time back 3 years ago, me and my partner, now wife and the mother of our 1-year-old baby, who just turned 1 yesterday. So shout out for our little son. For those of you who don't know, MasterChef is a amateur cooking competition where people with no culinary background create and compete against each other to create these fantastic culinary creations. So we were watching MasterChef on the sofa with my partner, just kind of like chilling out. And at the time, she decided that it would be hilarious if she signs up in my name for MasterChef, because I used to cook a lot at home. Like it's something that we like very close to me, of like recreating the flavors of Hungary wherever we are. And it was always kind of like part of our family tradition of like just making like, great food. I'm not a great chef by any means, but I do like, sharing our flavors with other people. So my partner signed up without me knowing on the online platform for MasterChef, and she forgot to mention that to me. So what happened is probably a month after that night when we were watching MasterChef, my phone rings and it's from a hidden number, right? But I pick up, and it's a very nice lady, very polite, calling from MasterChef, and they would like to interview me. So I do the only reasonable thing that anyone would do in that case. I hang up the phone. So it took them 2 other tries to actually reach me and convince me that like, wait, this is not a spam. We are really from MasterChef. We would love to interview you and we would love to speak with you. So that's how this journey started. Then again, completely surreal, and that's never anything that we thought I would be doing. But I went through the selection process. There's over 25,000 people applying each year. And to this day, I have no idea why they picked me. Might have been my accent. I don't know, but it's something that somehow I ended up on BBC primetime, actually preparing a Hungarian traditional dish called a hortobágyi palacsinta. I'm not going to ask you to repeat that, Mitch. And, that was a fantastic experience. Unfortunately, I didn't win MasterChef. Maybe I wouldn't be here if I would have, but that ignited this spark of finally do something with Hungarian cuisine, culinary tradition, and just try to create something. And that was the very first step that helped us kind of start our journey towards Budapest.
Okay, I'm happy that you didn't win because we're talking now and our industry is happier having you in it. But what was it that led you from being on that appearance to thinking this could become a tour company and my life and my business?
So that's a great question. And it has multiple aspects, kind of like building blocks, as I like to think about it. And I guess starting with the first one, as I mentioned before, that I always love to cook, that's my happy place. I love welcoming people, friends, and showing them the rich culinary tradition and flavors of Hungary. I love our flavors. I love our culture. I love our hospitality. And, throughout growing up in Hungary, it's something that kind of like the family tradition, we have no such a thing as a small meal in Hungary. So you cannot have just a bite, right? You always have to have the whole family table, everyone gets together, there's drinks, food. So there's no quick meals in our culture pretty much. The other part, and that kind of comes back to my experience in video games, it does look like the dream job initially, but the reality is it's a very corporate environment. Ultimately, what I felt after over 15 years for working in the industry is a burnout. I'm really not adding any value to this product. And I just really felt that combining that with my passion of cooking and welcoming people, it just seemed like a perfect starting point to create something unique. And that started our market research to look around in Hungary to see, hey, are there any cooking classes or food tours, anything that would show travelers our way of living through food. So what we try to do is really think about how can we introduce our culture, our cuisine, our history, not as individual pieces, but as a holistic experience altogether. So that was kind of like the motivation. And I do have to tell you that our history is full of these pure chances. We looked around in the market and, we looked at different platforms. We were like, oh, how, let's look at our other operators, what other food tours or market to table cooking classes are there. And we found nothing. And we were like, this is fantastic. It's an empty niche. We can move in, it's great. For some reason, we missed the fact that when we did this research, it was January. So middle of winter. We did this market research. We're like, let's do, no one else is doing it. We're going to be great. We're going to be awesome. So we started, we registered on a platform. And then for the first few months, we didn't have many bookings. And then spring comes and the marketplace floods with other experiences. So we were standing there oh my God, how could we not think about the seasonality of this industry, right? So bit of a rookie mistake there, but we already set everything up. So we figured, why not? And it did work out on the long term because it really helped us to become one of the leading operators in the culinary space in Budapest. But oh man, if I think about that, such a rookie mistake of ignoring the seasonality on that front.
That's a better mistake than the other mistake, which is you start your business and it's going along and you forget that at the end of the season, your bookings drop off the cliff and you've got all of this money spent in employees and ads and everything else. Then you realize you have no income coming in afterwards. So in the scheme of things, not too bad of a mistake. What do you look back on and think, I really wish I had known this starting a little earlier?
Yeah, so I think that kind of leads us into our second largest mistake that we kind of created. I'm going to be mindful with this topic because I think there might be a few listeners opinionated on this. But for the first initial 3 months, the only platform that we listed our experiences were Airbnb experiences. So, and again, like just in terms of like, we didn't even know at the time of, like that there's so many other platforms like Get Your Guide, TripAdvisor. But for some reason, again, because we were like so focused on our experiences and just like really like learning and figuring stuff out as we went, for the initial 3 months, we were only listed in one platform. And then gradually, like we learned like, wow, there's this entire empire of like different kind of like platforms with different niches, different customers. And I guess for us, one of the most important learning that we were very conscious about is help your customers find you, be present on as many platforms or as many locations, on social media, on your own website, on blogs, articles, because there's a huge amount of people looking for experiences, right? So the best thing that you can do, in our opinion, as a tour operator is to maximize your chances to be present, to help customer discovery, right?
So were you leading the tours in the early days? And were you using your celebrity to draw people into the product?
Initially, I was absolutely running the tours. So I was having probably 18-hour days when I was having my 8-hour day job. And then in the evenings, I jumped over and I run a few hour tours, including preparation, working with vendors and kind of sorting that out. One of my favorite memories was actually the very first tour. I remember clearly that I just returned from a overseas trip from the States. The jet lag is quite heavy, as well as it was a very like exhausting trip. And I remember it's around like 10 or 11 p.m., in Budapest, in our apartment. And I got this buzz from the phone, right? I heard like this jingle that wasn't familiar with me, right? Like it's not like a Facebook message or it's anything. And I checked the phone and it was a booking for an experience tomorrow starting at 10 o'clock for a single solo traveler. And he was our very first guest. And that's one of these pivotal moments I like to think about, that I was so close just canceling that reservation and like saying like, you know what, not this time. And I was like, no, let's do it. This is the first booking. Let's see where that leads. And we had a fantastic experience. And I think some of the operators might know, like when you have like a one-to-one experience, it can be great, but also it's very demanding because you have to make sure that the person is having fantastic experience, but it's also very intense, I think. But overall, it turned out great. And I think I'm really glad I did that. And that really helped us to like start building that momentum that helped us to become the operator that we are today. But it was definitely very tricky in the early days. And we were like, again, 14, 18-hour days. Obviously didn't have much time for personal life with my partner. So I do have to give a shout out to her because she's been an absolute fantastic partner in that. But very clearly it became that if you want to scale this operation, and not only from a personal perspective, but from a business perspective, we have to start bringing people in. And that's what to allow us to expand. When I stepped away from the day-to-day experiences and we started to work with a team of people who we not only work with them as freelancers, but one of the crucial decisions we made is we hired everyone as a full-time employee, which is quite rare, at least in these type of experiences.
How soon into the creation of your business did you start hiring full-time guide employees?
Yeah, so relatively quick, I would say in the first 3 months, once we've seen that the concept itself works, so we get customers, and we got the first customer, then we got people finding us, leaving positive reviews. We kind of like start to think about like, cool, how can we scale this into a operation that can be like more than a single individual? And after 3 months, we made the bet of like finding a like very talented partner. And at that point, this was a bet slash investment from our perspective because we didn't know if it's going to work out on the long term, right? I did believe, and we did, kind of like applying some of the software development mindset, and that's something that's very important. I think a lot of operators to think about. So you need to understand what you want your business to be, or like what's your aspirational goal. And what I mean by that is, are you looking just to kind of like have a on something on the side, or are you looking to scale this into a one-person operation? You're looking to scale this into a 5-person operation, or are you looking to scale this into a corporation, right? And all of those decisions very early, I think it's important for people to at least have an idea, because that can really help you to make the choices you need to make along the way. And for us, we didn't know if we want to be like a, 10-person or 50-person operation, but we knew that we need people to support and work with us to scale. And that's what kind of like drove our decision to like really invest and bet on the team. And after 3 years of being in operation, that's something that we've seen that not only resulted in higher quality experiences. And I know it does sound cliche when you talk about like your team as a family, but like that's how we feel, because our experiences is about creating a family style environment. So it would be almost hypocritical not to live the same values, within our team than what we're offering to our guests.
That's such a great point, that last point of understanding that you are walking the walk that you are trying to sell to people. I think it's a big risk. I mean, I know a lot of people in the audience are going to go, wow, there's so much financially at stake in doing that. And it's true, but my reaction to that is, number one, it buys you into making this business work. In other words, I know a lot of part-time tourpreneurs whose businesses never really get off the ground. And it's because they have a full-time job and it's kind of what they dabble in, and they expect it to kind of grow automatically or naturally on its own, but it doesn't. It's a real grind, and it really demands so much of who you are. My second thought though is that you're able to start to create something so real and powerful when you have the buy-in of a guide who you know is going to dependably show up and deliver those experiences. It frees you to create a business, because a lot of tourpreneurs get caught in it's not a trap, because it's also a lifestyle decision, like you said, but there's a moment where you have to decide, am I the business person or am I the guide? Because being both is a commitment to being a specific size of business. And I know a lot of companies who are like, we want to grow, scale. And yet 25 hours of their week are spent guiding the experiences.
I think it all starts of like you building out a plan of like what you would like this to be. And then that will really help to inform decisions, right? And then, by the way, those decisions like might not be right. And again, from our perspective, this was a bet that worked out. So you have to learn and you have to try different aspects. I'm a huge fan of just trying things and like seeing how it works. And listeners might be wondering of like, okay, full-time employee is cool, like higher cost on the business, but how does it look in the off season, right? And the way I like to think about that, it's quite interesting, because think for a second if you're a software company, and let's say you have a team of fantastic engineers, like the best engineers you ever worked with, right? Like they make the best code, like they can solve any problems, like they're great people. But every year there's 2 or 3 months when there's no coding to be done. There's no clients. As a software company, you don't let go everyone for 3 months and then try to rehire them because maybe they moved on. And plus, it's not great from a talent's perspective, because they can't really plan a life if they know that, oh, in the winter I have no income. So I think it demonstrates well the idea of the way we think about our team is to really invest in them, help them grow, help them develop. And for the winter months, if you're wondering what are we doing, it's a perfect opportunity for product development. And that's something that, not everyone, of course, but most people love to be creative. They love to share ideas. They love to work up things. And, maybe during cool seasons, they don't have, or we don't necessarily have the time to focus on that. But we have like 2 or 3 months where we can just focus on ideating and creating new ideas and concepts. And that's something that we've seen a lot of passion come through from, a lot of great ideas come through.
This is music to my ears, because I think in general, there's not enough ideation or creativity or experimentation in the kinds of experiences that we offer to the industry in general. That's a little bit of my soapbox sentiment as I take hundreds of tours every year. So I'm interested, and I know I'm setting you up now. I'm interested to see what your team and also you as a newbie who didn't have experience came up with for experiences. And what was that like in the earliest stages when you were sort of thinking, all right, I guess I'm a food tour operator. I've got the name, I've got the brand, I've got the MasterChef, stamp of approval. What did you create?
I love that question because it was such a fun experience to design our experiences. Something that was from the start super, super important for us is to focus on the emotional aspect of the tours. There's a concept that I quite like, which is essentially tours are a form of entertainment, right? I mean, like you can, discuss or, you can have different interpretations, but the way we see people who are booking tours, they're looking for, some sort of entertainment experience. And the big distinction is that there's two types of entertainment. Well, there's multiple types. So the way we look at them, there's active entertainment and passive entertainment. Passive entertainment, like watching a movie, a TV show, or even reading a book, where you have a medium coming at you and all you have to do is consume that, right? So there's no back and forth. The idea is that for tours like that, a active entertainment that requires constant feedback, reacting to the situations, to the vibes of the people. You really need to adjust a lot of that. And the fun thing is that there's actually quite a lot of overlap between video game design and tour design from the perspective of both of them are active entertainment, which means that the same way as a tour guide manages different types of guests and experiences and situations, from my video game background, that's also something we have to be very conscious about, like how we design experiences, what does the level look like, how does that interact with the people, because there's that continuous feedback. And when we looked at our tours, we actually focused on this aspect of like, how can we make our experiences emotionally rewarding for everyone who's attending. And here's a cool little exercise that I would recommend people to try. I kind of call it the emotion chart or the emotion graph. And the reason I'm saying that because emotion is what people remember. Like you're not going to remember the exact date when this church or temple was built, but you're going to remember how you felt. So it's very important, I think, for all of our design to focus on the emotional aspect. But an exercise I like to recommend is when you're thinking about your experience, first, put yourself in the shoes of the guests and the travelers' shoes and try to understand of like each part of the tour, what might be their current emotional state, right? If you have let's say a tour that starts early in the morning, right? So they might be sleepy, they might be tired, they might still be waking up. So then when you go later, let's say that you're heading towards a big point of interest, maybe that's the highlight of the tour, what they might feel. Do they feel anticipation? Are they tired? Like maybe they've been walking too much. Essentially do this exercise almost all of the steps of your tour. So like first you understand what the guest you think might feel, or you can even ask the guest after. And then do your own journey, as a guide, like when you're talking about the different steps, what sort of emotion are you creating? So what I mean by that is, let's say it's a morning tour, so you know that the guests might be sleepy, and then the emotion you want to create is excitement, right? And then what you have to do is compile the two aspects and just really understand how can you achieve that. You could buy them a round of coffee. You could like just share some like sneak peeks or like upcoming exciting things that might happen. There's many ways, and I think it really depends on each individual. But I think it's a fun exercise that could really help you point out discrepancies in your experience and just find points that you can optimize it so you really cater towards what the guests are looking for. But to get back to your original point, like how did we put all of this together? Our very first and probably most popular experience is our market to table cooking class. And it's the full package. We meet in one of the oldest and largest historical markets in Budapest. It is a fantastic spectacle. You step inside and you feel like the air has changed because there's so much space and you hear like the people, the smells, like everyone bustling around. Then we go around and then we talk about a little bit of the history, the traditional ingredients, the flavors, but you got to taste them because it wouldn't be a full experience if you just talk about stuff, because through food and flavors, that's how you really experience, in my opinion, like the culture and people. So we not only taste our ingredients, but we also buy everything fresh from the local market. Local producers, small scale, people who's been, like coming to the market for 40 or 50 years. So these are the vendors that we really like to work with. And from that experience, we acquired our goods, our, like our ingredients. We had to, not a clean kitchen, and that's something we often see, that like some cooking classes, they take place in a kind of Gordon Ramsay style high-end kitchen, whereas everything is like super clean, almost like a operating table. And we always felt, and I participated in some experiences, and they were great, but again, when you think about the emotional aspect of what people expect, they expect real connection with the people and the culture. And because of that, our actual cooking class takes place in a old apartment location in Budapest that is a very traditional building, which means that there's many buildings like this, but you step inside and there's the little inner garden where the big city noises just quiet down, and then you're in this like magical moment. And then you have a hands-on cooking class where, again, the focus is not on the high-level technique, because we don't want to stress people out. It's like, oh, you're cutting the onions wrong, or like this is not the right way or the wrong way. It's about the emotion. Like we taste for flavor, we share our best practices. We use actually my grandma's recipe or recipes in these experiences. So throughout the whole journey, there's this part of authentic connections with not only with the guides, but the local culture, architecture, history. So with that, and like that's how we like to think about our experience. And as I started before, it's the whole package. If you're looking to explore Budapest in its most pure and authentic form, that's the answer that we're trying to, and that's the solution that we're trying to offer to all of our guests, really.
There's so much to unpack there. And I want to get back to this idea of emotion because, in my other life, I teach tour experience design and I teach storytelling to tour guides, to new tour businesses. And it seems like an uphill battle or a challenge to say to somebody, and oftentimes it's somebody who has studied a lot or researched a lot of material for a tour that they're creating, to say that ultimately very soon after the tour, they're going to forget everything that you said. And yet they're going to remember really core emotional resonances and responses that they had to you as a person, to the place as a full-bodied, all senses experience. And that it's as important, and I would say much more important, to think about how upon entering this food market, you want the guest to have an emotional reaction to it, rather than immediately what I often see, which is, welcome to the food hall. Let me tell you about the market history. Let me tell you about the architecture over here. Let me tell you everything that I'm proud to research. When, to me, the emotion design is take a moment. You've stepped into one of the oldest and largest food markets in Europe. Close your eyes and just smell the chaos and the beauty, and have that first emotional reaction, a personal reaction, and a really memorable one, because that's how the brain remembers things, and then guide them into the story or the information.
I love that approach. If you think about it, when you're watching a movie, let's say it's an action movie, right? You're not looking to watch 2 hours of non-stop fighting. You need pacing. You need to introduce the characters. Then you need to give a little time to breathe for the audience and the people. And I think a lot of the same concept could be and maybe should be applied to the tours that we create, because again, it's about the active, engaged entertainment. And, as I said before, that instead of being tour guides, our guides more like a vibe guide, because, maybe some people love the history and they're like, that's their thing, right? And we need to be able to be flexible to serve their needs, because that's going to lead them to have a memorable experience. and recommend, like us, and create that brand recognition that I think really helps to like establish yourself as a brand, really. So I think, as you said, like I love the applying the storytelling concept to our tours, because that's what we do, right? Like we are storytellers in a way. And I think once you put a little bit of like thought of like how to apply emotion and pacing, we also ask our guests to close their eyes and just listen to the sounds and the smells. And it's such a great moment. It's almost like a hypnotic moment, like you close your eyes in a busy, like environment. And sometimes people are like, I don't want to close my eyes here. They're holding their bags and we're like, we got you. Like just 10 seconds. And then it's almost like a transformative experience. It's like when you entered the barrier to enter into this adventure, right? Like in a movie when the hobbits leave the Shire, right? They make that step, and then all of a sudden you're there with them.
The organizations that I think have really mastered this are religions. They've designed rituals that transform your sense of what it means to be a human through design, spatial design, ritual design. You enter into a cathedral. Why are they so freaking tall? Well, it elevates your spirit. You look up, you feel like you are in a completely different feeling of a space than if you were to just go into a little house church or something, or if it was the same height. And think of also the way you enter in, and there's incense, there's bells. I'm not saying everybody needs to become religious, but we can look at the way human culture has created experiences that have stood for thousands of years in every and any religion possible. And they all get to this core sense of needing to resonate in a full-bodied way with the person you're trying to connect with.
And I think it absolutely leads back into the emotional side of things, right? Because that's what all of these experiences really like touch, and like that's what helps people to remember these. And if that being religion or a experience when you walk across a beautiful field, or when you take part of a food tour or like a city tour, I think it's all of the same underlying concepts that help everyone create memorable experiences.
So there's something that I also look at often when I'm designing an experience or when I'm teaching, which is the emotion wheel. And I don't know if you've ever seen an emotion wheel. You can just Google it if you're listening. It is hundreds and hundreds of emotions that are kind of color coded into different food groups of emotions. And you, as a video game designer, I want to ask you about this. There's a sense in which our job is to entertain people for a couple of hours, show them a really good time and get them to smile and laugh and have a good feeling. But that's not what video game design is. Video game design includes frustration, fear, the anxiety of losing a life, the boredom of trying to get something to work, and then a sense of mastery and accomplishment. There's a lot of negative emotions that are actually really important and really helpful because it contributes to, I call it like kind of emotion flow, right? It needs to go somewhere. There needs to be storytelling in the emotions, and it can't just be, that was delicious. That was so informative. That was funny. Next stop, next stop, next stop. That's an emotional flatness. And so I'm wondering if you have somehow thought through that as a game designer.
Yeah, Mitch, and now I'm really feeling that kind of like two words collide in a way, and I'm just so glad that you brought up the emotion wheel, because that's an actual tool that we actively used in multiple games, but primarily the development of Sea of Thieves. For my gamer friends out there, if they know that game, the emotion wheel was a core concept that when we actually looked at our design game experiences, we were actively studying of like once you go through these like 30 to 45-minute experience, like what emotions did you feel? Like how did the wheel kind of like move? Did it jump from like sadness to happiness immediately? And like how did that feel? Maybe too stark of a contrast. I think one of the key words I would use is empathy. And like if you would be a guest, like what would you like to do? And I think it's important to try to do this as well as often as you need to, but because often people kind of like, I think, as you said, they might end up in doing the same routines, the same repeated, like I do these, I do that, and like, cool, that's a tour. But you have to actively think about what the guests are feeling, what they expect, right? To give you a specific example, we used to have a part in our tour when we do a little bit of a history deep dive. So we have like a nice location. We have a traditional homemade Hungarian spirit, a palinka shot, which I recommend only for the bravest one out there. Our experience had this, like great taste of like local flavors. And then we had a 10 to 15 minute part about kind of like history or like the history of Hungary. And what we realized is that, what we see in guests where they were like kind of like bored, their head on the side, like turning around, looking out the environment. And we quickly realized that although we think it's a cool thing to learn about our history, it doesn't really fit the theme, the emotion, the experience. It's just like a bonus added thing. So we shortened and changed up that section. So we focus on where does the drink come from and the experience that the people just went through like a few seconds before, instead of us trying to go into a different path, right? So look at your guests, understand what they feel. If you have the chance, get some feedback from them, like after the experience, like, hey, what are the aspects that you didn't like so much? What are the ones that you did like, right? So it's not only just the negative. I think it's very important for everyone to understand your strengths. And then, as you said, like not everything has to be happy and high intensity all the time. And there's a place for, obviously frustration. I think in tours, like you don't want people to be frustrated, but like maybe when you're teaching them a specific cooking skill, maybe frustration is
Yeah.
part of it, right? Because initially it's
Yeah.
not easy to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking of a class I took in Italy where I was making gnocchi, and for 10 minutes I was messing up. And then when I got it, I got it. Or I was making ravioli. I don't even know what it was I was making. I am not a cook at all. But the sense of accomplishment after the effort and the trial and error. There's a type of frustration, which is where the heck is the meeting point because the description on the website was really vague. That's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I think, but to your point, and I'm so delighted that you use the color wheel in your video game design, is I think it helps you even just to reflect, like, are there different colors that are happening throughout my tour? I think that's the simplest thing. Like, is different stops, different colors, a moment of peace and reflection and calm and taking it all in, a moment of high intensity. And where is that moment of high intensity? You have to build to it, it becomes pretty natural. But there's another aspect to this that I'm interested in, which is you talked about the kind of the authenticity of entering into this environment, this space that feels lived in, feels real, feels grandma style, as you say, and that the setting and the experience of where you are doing these things matters so much. And oftentimes cooking classes are in these kind of sterile rented environments that don't feel alive with story or history.
Yeah. And, like that was like a conscious design from our side, as, when we're discovering and understanding different options. And as you said, we could have like went towards like a kitchen for a higher situation. Probably we could have had that, like a nice experience, right? But I think the way that we've been thinking about our experience is like how can we really push the envelope, and especially coming into a field with no experience. And already I think in most major cities or like locations, there's going to be cooking classes, food tours, culinary tours, right? So you have to put a lot of emphasis on quality. Like that's one of the key things that you can distinguish and kind of carve out a space for yourself. And there's so many aspects of that, like the actual experience, the presentation, right? To make sure that you have high quality photos. Like please invest in a professional photographer. And kind of like I see so many other operators who are, like authentic, like handheld photos are great, but it's night and day, I think, when it comes to conversion rates and like other support if you have high quality, like images and pictures. And also like recent ones as in, like when I see photos from the early 2000s or, like very low resolution, it tells customers that, oh, this experience haven't been updated like recently. But if you have, high quality modern photos, dare I say seasonal photos, like that's something that, like we're trying to do more and more to have like seasonal type of experiences as well.
I, I think you've sort of nailed the experience design, and you alluded to your guides. You call that vibe guiding, which I love. The word vibe is seeping into everything, but for good reason. Like, to me, I'm interpreting vibe guiding as your guides have a toolkit of stories, of practices, of things they could be doing in any given situation, but there is no perfect script as to what you use and what you do and what you say in every given moment, because every group is so customized, so different. They come from different countries. They bring different, personalities to the mix. And so your job as a guide is to marry this body of knowledge and this passion and love that you have of like the place and the food, but deliver it in a way that really connects. I mean, to me, that's another side of empathy, right? Is making sure you're actually connecting and not just saying, well, that's my tour, love it or leave it.
Not one of our experiences are the same, right? And because that comes from our guides, and that's something we actively encourage and kind of like expect from our guides, is that we provide the kind of like foundation, like the high level steps, like, okay, like this is the route, like this is our vendors, these are the flavors. But we very much look for people who have great passion. It doesn't have to be just about culinary traditions or just about history. We just look people with passion, because something we found is that if you have passion for what you do, you can learn any skill, any script, like anything really, but passion is much harder to cultivate. And because of that, I think we also see that in our reviews. Like over the 3 years, we built around 1,250-ish reviews, around the 4.9 rating across all platforms. And like what we see there is that people give shout out for our guides, and like they mention their names, and it's not just this was fun, they were our guide, but it's like, oh my god, Kinga did an amazing experience, or wow, Messi like showed us this very, very cool stuff. And when we look at our data, because that's something we do quite a lot, again, just to understand how our customers behave, what they like, what they dislike, that really helps us to understand what's working. And so far, again, just using some of these KPIs and metrics that we've been looking at, I think this, again, bets on focusing on the team and their passion and just like really getting the authentic connection out. It's been something that helped us to like really grow in the last few years.
What do you say to the operator who says, well, what's important to me though is brand consistency. I want to make sure that I am delivering a certain quality of product to my customers no matter what. And so they're afraid of giving too much freedom or choice because it becomes very difficult to manage the consistency of the product.
Yeah, and that's a tricky one, right? Because I think it all depends on the context and the type of operations you run, right? Because let's say if you're if you're doing like a bus tour to different locations, like maybe it doesn't make as much sense to give full freedom for the driver to just explore a different village in one day. So, like there's some cases I think when, like some structure and like organization makes a bit more sense. I think
there's a Netflix movie about a tour guide. It's like a love story of a tour guide and falls in love with this woman. But at a certain point on the multi-day tour, he decides to take the bus to his parents' house and have all of the guests stay there. And they spend a couple of days there. And all I'm thinking is the other hotel like calling saying, where the hell are you? Wasn't this contracted for a year? Isn't there a sunk cost? I was like,
yeah, but like, I mean, sign me up for that experience. I mean,
I know. And
yeah, like, I love that.
Great. Hell, it caused them to fall in love. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, no, but like I agree with that. And I think it's really, as I said, like it comes down to the context, right? And also, when you talk about your brand consistency, I think it all comes from understanding what is your brand is about, who is your target audience. I mean, that's the key thing. And I see so many, not only operators, but like other businesses, like if you don't quite sure, or if you cannot describe who's your core audience, then, take a few hours, like really define that in one or two sentences, because that will help to make all the decisions from there. What are you trying to provide? What problem you're solving for your customers or your guests? Everything stems from that. If you have, in our cases, that level of like freedom to our guides, it just enhances our brand, right? Because we're about connecting people through food and culture. And for us, that works, right? in our example of if you're like a, like a bus driver, maybe less so, right? But it all starts from like just understanding what your brand is. And when it comes to driving that consistency, like what is that consistency, right? Like if for example, you're doing historical tours and your audience is like people who are deeply interested in the historical aspect, by all means, like stick to the script, like that's what people, if that works, right? But it comes back to the vibe guide concept. If you're presenting something and halfway through the tour, or hopefully earlier, you realize that, wow, they're not interested about history, but they love food, like, let's make a little detour. It might cost a bit more for the tour, but what's important, and this is something we're very huge, is that we rather sacrifice some cost from a operation perspective to provide an excellent experience, because people are going to talk about us, they're going to recommend to their friends, they're going to leave positive reviews. We even had people who came back to the same cooking class, and that's something like repeat customers. We don't see that often, and it was great to see that people just had such great time that they would come back. So I think just really kind of like nail down that aspect of your operations.
So we're nearing the 1 hour mark, and I do want to get into some of the more practical things about your business and about where it's all headed. So you've got this fantastic product. You have a name of a company that is pretty city dependent. It feels very connected to Budapest, and a company that is also very personal. And so I'm wondering, are you looking to expand? Are you looking to go to other cities? What does growth mean to you as you project into the future?
Yeah, and that is a great question, because that obviously keeps us up at night as well, right? And we're trying to make sure that, as I said, we have not only a short term but a mid and long term vision as well. And something we're very passionate about is really creating these authentic experiences. And I do believe that there's when we think about the Foodapest brand, like, let's remove the name for a second. Like, I love the name, like it's close to me, like it's, we love it. But if I remove the name itself and we just think about the actual experiences that we provide, this authentic, real connection with like locals, we do feel like there's an opportunity for us to like share the magic in other countries, regions, locations. Obviously not under the Budapest brand. We want to make sure that we, like scale in a space that is sustainable, so it doesn't create negative experiences for our guests. But also we do think that the niche that we're operating in right now, which is the holistic cultural connection experience, there's still a lot of spaces to kind of like explore within Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, and then from there, again, if we can support and work with like local people, and that's something very important for us. We don't want to become this kind of like large corporation that's managing 100 locations. We much more want to bet on quality or connection and kind of like building this brand of experiences. And we do think that there's an opportunity for that. I think the next few years is going to be very exciting for us, working with some of the great partners at Get Your Guide or some other platforms. Like, it's been fantastic to build these opportunities, as well as some B2B partners. That was one of our positive aspects, that organically we started to get B2B inquiries, which we were not prepared for, and so we had to figure it out. But we feel like there's a demand for these authentic kind of like experiences where you can connect with the people of the land and the locations. We haven't announced it yet, but there's a few other locations that will be launching the brand.
I love it. So that's a great teaser, and that means we're going to have to check in with you next year and see how the expansion and continuation is going. Final question. You've got a 1-year-old. Congratulations. And I also know that you've been working remotely. What has your experience been trying to grow and scale and maintain a business while balancing family and a life of adventure around the globe?
I think for this, I have to defer back to my fantastic partner. It was obviously challenging because the remote nature of setting up and managing these operations is quite tricky, but it does all lead back into having a core, fundamental, fantastic team who are great at doing what they do. They're passionate about what they do. We're going to grow together. And that's something that we can like really work with on the long term. And there's another benefit of us being a bit more kind of like flexible in locations. It did allow us to work with some other partners who we might have not been aware of, or if we would have lived in Hungary, we might have been outside of our kind of like sphere of just understanding or discovery. So there's been this positive synergy of us being in various locations. We're based in the UK right now, which is also a quick flight to Hungary, and that's something that actually happens quite a lot. That I kind of like fly between the locations, but obviously with a growing family and like having a 1-year-old, was an absolute blast little guy. Very mischievous. I don't know if it's after from me or from his mom, but we need to figure it out. For us right now, it's a priority to really help to share our brand of experiences to more locations, so more people can really have this very deeply immersive experiences. I think the easiest way to think about like what we're offering, if you're familiar with Anthony Bourdain and his work, he not only used to meet with people and just try different foods, but he spoke with the people. He really connected with the culture. So I guess we are offering that experience in a box, and hopefully we can find more and more people to share this, this magic with everyone.
Everybody keeps asking me in the industry who's going to be the next Anthony Bourdain. Now I have an answer. His name is Joseph. And this has been a beautiful conversation. It's been both kind of visionary in terms of thinking of the highest levels and the most emotional levels of what we do as creators of travel experiences, but also a really great practical story of investing in your team, investing in yourself, having a vision and sticking to it versus just following the crowd. And so I think this is going to be a very inspirational episode for all of our operators out there who are on their journey. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us on Tourpreneur.
Thanks so much, Mitch. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I just recently discovered, like your community, but I love what you're doing, and it's just been great to be part of this. So thank you for the opportunity.